for me it's a huge pleasure to introduce to you Ingrid Gogolin, our second keynote speaker. Ingrid is a professor for intercultural and comparative education at the University of Hamburg. And Hamburg is in Germany. Yes, because there is in Hamburg in the United States as well, just to be aware. And Ingrid is a very outstanding researcher. Her field of research is language and the role of language in education. And she has done a lot of work in really changing the mind of how to understand school as a multilingual place of learning. Ingrid is, in addition, not only an outstanding researcher, but she is somebody who knows how to bring research forward. She is one of the founders of the now most important journal for educational research in Germany with the highest impact.
But you were one too.
Psst, don't tell this. She was years the president of the German Educational Research Association. She was years president of the European Research Association. And she is the founding person, or one of the founding persons, of the World Research Association. So she is somebody who knows how to bring research forward. She makes outstanding research and she brings it forward. And that's in the field which is very related to global learning. And that's what we need. We need outstanding research, we need bringing it forward. So we are listening now to Ingrid. And we are very honored and very pleased that you are with us.
Okay, Annette, wie komme ich auf meine Präsentation?
Das machen wir automatisch.
Super. Okay.
Hoffentlich.
Hoffentlich. Good morning, everybody, esteemed colleagues. Annette, she's really exaggerating because we know each other for, say, a few years. And we cooperated a lot. And all you said is not my work, but it is always our work. So it's always a team working on these things. And in between these roles, you were mentioning, I also did some work. I feel very delighted and honored to have the chance to talk to you today because I didn't know about Angel before Annette introduced me to this. And I was really curious, and I hope for your understanding and for your openness, because global education is not my field. I'm a dilettante in this field, and I have the hope that your openness, our two speakers of this morning talked about the openness. I hope for your openness for my field, and my field is intercultural and international comparative research, in particular with a focus on migration and diversity. So I would like to give my very special thanks to Annette and the whole organizing team, because this is such a welcoming event, and it's wonderful to have all the encounters and listen to you and the many international voices I had the chance to hear already yesterday. So, global social justice and equality, I think these are promises that we hope will be fulfilled by public education systems. Public education systems include the formal, the non-formal, and the informal sector. At the same time, we must admit that public education systems didn't fulfill this promise until today, at least not to the extent we hoped that they would. A core task for my own research and the research of education, about education in general, is to identify the causes of this and to work in order to develop solutions that might improve the situation. In my contribution, I would like to invite you to a specific perspective on this issue. And this perspective is based on historical and international and language-related comparative research. So first, please join me for a brief look at the founding phase of public education systems as we know them today. And we know them today all over the world, albeit with nuances in some of the details of their practice. They're very, very much the same all around the world. And I would like in the next part of my contribution to compare them with today's perspective in order to illustrate that although the forms of communication, of delivering, of structuring education changed, the basic ideas did not change. And I think it's very necessary to make us aware of the basis on which we stand, because without that, change will never be possible. In the last part of my contribution, I would like to focus on one of these research projects trying to challenge aspects of the education systems which we do not accept until today. And this is related to the challenge of diversity in education and the traditions which obviously hinder dealing with diversity in an appropriate manner. So I'm looking forward to your comments and your ideas about my approach, but let's get started now. Public education systems as we know them today have their roots in the 18th century, that is from the 1700s onwards. And from the outset, they are linked to the promise of making education available to all, with the aim that everybody will be empowered to participate in a society. So this is nothing new. All you're asking for is very old. So no, not if we think of mankind in millions of years, it's not very old, but for our memories, it's a fairly old demand and promise in education. Okay, I have to press harder. Our conference venue, this very building, the Humboldt Forum, invites me to highlight two fundamentally important personalities whose ideas deeply ingrained the concept of education for all, as it was transferred to the whole world, actually. So you see the Humboldt brothers, both stand for a cosmopolitan orientation, so also this is nothing new. And they stand for intellectual curiosity. Alexander von Humboldt, the explorer and natural scientist, as he's usually seen, and Wilhelm, his brother, the educational reformer and humanities scholar. So the balance between nature, natural science, and humanities was embodied in these two personalities. Both were in close contact and benefited very much from each other's ideas and discoveries. Nevertheless, I've given Wilhelm a little more prominence here because obviously his influence on education is a bit more important. What is relevant at this point is that the Humboldt brothers belong to a global community of intellectuals, what was considered to be global by the time, so how you could reach it in the globe in technical ways. And they based their ideas about humanity and about what humans need for prosperous lives. on observations of life in different areas of the world, on the one hand, and on the boost of innovation that took place in their time. And they thought about the consequences all these innovation would have for individuals and the ways individuals live together. So the 18th century was the century of modernization bursts. And these bursts are relevant until today. And I'll just give you a few images. The feudal system as the basis for social order was increasingly called into question and replaced by ideas of civic participation which are guaranteed by the Constitution and case law. The Age of Enlightenment was what led us into perceptions of democracy as we understand them still today, although there is an increasing group of people who do not want to deal with democracy anymore, but that is not my point, and I won't go deeper into that. But we, let's say, a very, very large part of the countries around the world, to my opinion, thank God, are based on a notion of democracy, which was developed during these days. These transformations are tightly connected with negotiation and design of the classical nation state, and that is to say the invention that was made as nation state in Europe by the time. In this era, global interconnectedness between all areas of the world were hugely advanced. However, with the effect that we all know, with an increasingly European-dominated world. And by the time Great Britain was the leader of this movement, and now today it is not anymore. But this social and cultural modernization burst was accompanied or also driven by other inventions of the time, technical inventions and economical inventions, innovations that made all this possible. And on the other hand, the innovations were made possible due to new concepts of society. So as we all know, this historical perspective must be viewed with ambivalence. On the one hand, it manifests the power structure in the global society that is still effective today in many respects, and we are not content with this. But on the other hand, what we must not forget is it gives rise to the fundamental idea that education, or Bildung as we would call this in Germany, is an undeniable human right. That is something we should keep in mind when we talk about change. The massive transformation of the era stimulated the idea that access to cultural skills could no longer be reserved to small groups of privileged individuals. In particular, an increasingly literate population was necessary for the good of the community, or to put it in a more profane manner, to create a population that is useful in transferring all these new ideas of the time into everyday practice. So education was invented because it was necessary. From a normative point of view, the emergent concept of the classical nation state offered an appropriate frame of reference for this development. It was based on the strong belief that societies based on birthrights can be overcome, that it would be possible to replace the egoism of nobility and the sovereigns by a just and fair system of government, or in today's world that social justice and equality in a society are possible. We keep that in mind. From the outset, the concept of the classical, and that is to say the European nation state, was closely linked to the basic idea of education for all. And that is the idea, education for all, which still exists and which still is not fulfilled in all its respects. There is no doubt that this development originated in Europe and was exported from here. But that is not the whole story. Due to the increasing possibilities of mobility and exchange, the development of ideas about education was inspired by influences from other areas of the world in many ways, because the intellectuals of the time were travelers. They were cosmopolitans. This may be one of the reasons why, if we look back on this successful history, why it was so successful, because it included ideas that were not only deriving from one place in the world or from one certain type of intellectuals. So this is the European picture. This is the Japanese picture. It was about the same time when education in this kind of framework was imported and the other type of education was replaced. This success story was by no means accompanied by a standardization of social norms or concepts of society. That was not the case. But there was a broad consensus on what education should achieve in the face of an unknown and uncertain future. And there are three simple things: access to literacy, access to numeracy, and access to understanding the natural world. Access to understanding. And access to understanding at the same time meant access to openness for interaction. So this, addressing all children in the foundation phase, all was, in some parts of the world, only related to the male part of humanity. But that didn't take long. For example, in Europe, it was very, very quickly open to all children in a literal way. Access to all in the foundation phase was meant as serving for both, for the good of the individual as well as for the society, or in today's word, as a prerequisite for the possibility of social justice. So, remembering history is important, I think, because it reminds us that the impetus for profound changes in society and in education came from the outside world, not from the inside of education. But there are windows of opportunity for education and the education system, and what you now would call education researchers, like Humboldt would never be called one, but I would call him one, that there are windows of opportunity, and we have to take advantage of these windows of opportunity, and that there are, at the same time, certain mechanisms that are deeply rooted in societal structures, and they can undermine the best intentions over a long period of time, and I'll speak about this in the next part. But just have a quick look at what Humboldt said by the time about education for all. Education is aimed at the human being in general. So he didn't make a difference. And he related to a notion of diversity that was relevant by the time. And in today's words, we would say this is a notion that considers access to wealth or access to power, because what is indicated by him is people are different with respect to their occupation, and that means with respect to their living conditions, and that means with respect to the money they have, etc., etc. So this aspect, economic and social background, is a matter of difference which has to be considered. So this is how he posed the challenges of education. Well, I'm now talking about the broken promises, but not only about the broken promises. Let's have a look into data indicating what we have achieved of these promises until today in a global perspective. What we have achieved is a different wording on the one hand. I just took this as an example. So we see there that diversity is today kind of got more diverse, and we're describing it in a more differentiated manner. We have more ideas about what diversity looks like and how we would have to tackle it. But the message is the same. Let's look into some data indicating what we achieved, actually. In my following part, my following explanations are based on one study that is published by Nature. I chose this study because it not only mirrors the situation we face today, but it also has an outlook, you see on the most right part of the illustration, to 2030. So what can we expect based on statistical data? And we all know the hardest job to do is looking to the future. So we do not believe too much in this, but it gives us some ideas. So the first one is absolutely a success story. You see that this, by the way, is related to the goals of SDGs targets. The positive message, which I show you here, is that with respect to early education phase, we have made a tremendous progress. Nearly every area of the world in the period from 1970 to 2018, that is the database, there was a rise in participation in primary education, so in the basics of a basic part of education, and even in secondary and in tertiary education, it is a rise, a steep rise. So this is a success story. We have implemented education system that more and more address more parts of all, even in the tertiary phase. And that is something we should be proud of, because this is not an easy task. So the main message here, nevertheless, is it is the global north and high income regions, which are in this dotted dark green line, in the two, or what would you call it, blue? I don't know. These set the frame. So in these areas, nearly 100% of children achieve primary, even close to 100 secondary and tertiary education. So, and this goal is not reached everywhere, but more areas of the world are getting more close to it. And that is, I think, a success story. So in this respect, the promise is about to be kept. There is another respect, a second illustration, which also shows a success story, and that is the closing of the gender gap. If you see the most left, no, from your point of view, yeah, it's the most left part, you see in the 1970s, the education system served mainly the male part of human beings. But already in 2018, more areas of the world have a similar, or some areas of the world favor women in their education systems. And the estimate for 2030 shows that we are in danger to change inequality in that male are in danger. So we should do something about gender equality, also considering the male part of the populations. So this indicates major changes of inequality around the world, and these changes hold. So they are things to be positive about. What we can't be positive about is the change in inequality systems, where income and wealth are indicators, and this is shown here. You see in the left parts that overall there was a reduction of inequality, but the reduction was highest in the wealthy areas of the world and lowest in the less wealthy areas of the world. And there is no major change in the difference between the high income, etc., areas of the world and the low income, etc., areas of the world. That where incomes and wealth indicators are high, inequality levels tend to be lower and get lower. And we see no change, no signs of significant change in this respect. And that is being shown in the right part of the graph. You see no signs of change in the poor countries, but a lot of change in what we call the global north. So you could put this, I'm not really somebody who knows very much about citing the Bible, but I find this citation: for the one who has, more will be given, and from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. So this is what is shown here. At this point, we could simply conclude that the mechanisms associated with power relations and wealth are so strong that they cannot be overcome through education, even in such a long period of time. And indeed, let's be realistic, I'd say. I'm not sure that education is powerful enough to change the world. But still, we have reasons to be optimistic, and the gender example shows us the bright side of the story. So change is possible. It is possible, but there are two prerequisites for change, and the one is significant investments over a long period of time, and the other is this investment has to be linked to a change of mindset. So these are the two prerequisites we can't overcome, and we can't overcome them in education alone, but we need the outside world to support us in this. Let's talk about change now. change is possible, as I said. And what can we do as education researchers and as education practitioners to contribute to change, and in particular with respect to social justice? Here are some thoughts I'd like to share with you, and I'd like to share with you a warm welcome to the World Education Research Association, and it has already referred to this network. Experience shows, and it is also proved by statistical observation, that joint activities, in particular in international, particularly based on international consensus and international collaboration, are the most powerful tool for bringing about profound change in education and in other areas. The example we all know of is, like, think of the PISA studies. So if there hadn't been an international activity on a joint idea, all the thinking about education and whatever we think about these types of studies, all this wouldn't have been possible. No one single area of the world would have been able to achieve the move that was initiated by the PISA studies. So that is why I would like to introduce you to this other association of international researchers, a community of scholars all around the globe. You see the areas where we are located. We strive to reach consensus and initiate collaboration of researchers around the world, in a certain sense very similar to what you do, but not related to one single topic. So WIRA is an association of researchers with an optimistic mission, and I'm a happy member of this association. Our work is based on the recognition of the obstacles to achieve fair and equitable education systems, and we take for granted that we know the obstacles. So, not least thanks to these big studies like PISA, etc., we know what are the obstacles. There is no need to do profound research into this question, what are the obstacles, because we know them. We need to observe them further, that's true, but no news are given up to us by research in that respect. So we can base our future work about how to change on aspects that that consider the question, how can the obstacles be overcome? And that is a different type of research which is needed in conjunction with the observation of what happens. So how do the obstacles develop? So this is a type of knowledge which needs an empirical basis, a solid empirical basis for effective changes. And with respect to that, we decided to focus on two issues that are relevant drivers of inequality based on the knowledge we have in education systems all around the world. And for the moment, we identified two such issues. So the one is growing diversity in school populations or in education in the groups that are in need of education. And one major cause of this is international migration with effects on linguistic, cultural, and social diversity in societies. And evenly widespread is the phenomenon of growing insecurity, stress, risks, health risks among adolescents, especially those living in vulnerable conditions. I'm not talking about these ones because this is not my field. My field is the other one. So for the next part of my talk, I'm talking about migration and the consequences. But what we know is that both these aspects, both these phenomena, are considerable drivers of inequality in education. So that is why we focus on them. It is no news for you that increasing migration is a global phenomenon. It might be news for some of you that the areas of the world that face most migration are, in the meantime, not the classical migration areas anymore, but Europe and Asia. So in particular, with respect to education, migration is a major driver of diversity of populations within the societies, in the national societies worldwide. And the specific aspect of it is that migration is young. So on the positive side of this illustration, you can say migration is a method of rejuvenating national populations. And the populations in the better of parts of the world are getting too old. So we need migration with that respect. On the other hand, of this picture is that the major part of migration is young. So in one way or the other, connected to one or the other measure in education systems. For education and social participation, particularly relevant is the increasing language diversity. What we see here is we have around 7,000 languages worldwide. Around 4,500 of these are vital, so they're not endangered. And in the areas that were considered to be monolingual areas in earlier times, we have an increase of languages on very small spots. So, for example, Sydney counted for 250 languages. They are proud of that. New York, figures from Manhattan, they counted about 700 languages. London, about 300. The sad thing is that in Europe, we do not have any reliable statistics on this, and especially in Germany, we don't have reliable statistics, but according to some regional statistics, the picture is like the Sydney-London one. So in all European areas, we have about 200 plus 300 plus languages, in particular in cities. And as we all know, language is the basis of everything in education. No education in a higher order sense is possible without language, without the understanding of concepts, without the possibility to express. So language is the foundation for higher order learning. And what can be called language competence is to be able to be able for oral language and literacy, writing, written language, in as many different ways as possible. That is what we would consider language competence. Global citizenship education is one of the areas where I think it is really necessary to think more about the language demands that are posed on learners by the contents that should be taught or transmitted to the young people. And language competence, in today's words, oracy and literacy, is the key to equity in increasingly diverse societies, but also in increasingly globalized ways of interaction between societies. In order to participate in modern societies, in particular literacy, is a prerequisite sine qua non. You can't be a part of a society making your claims in a society without being able to literacy. So what do we know about language diversity, about living, growing up in more than one language with respect to prerequisites for education? So here is what we know about multilingualism as an advantage. Multilingual lives bring advantages for metalinguistic awareness, which is a prerequisite for learning about languages. That means also learning about different subject matters, etc. So it's an advantage for the early acquisition of a differentiated cognitive pathway to access language, which is a very good prerequisite for becoming literate, because when you become literate, you have to make the change from the idea that orality and the written world have anything to do with each other. This is in fact not the case. Orality is derived or developed on the basis of natural competences to language, whereas literacy is a fully cultural competence. You can't access literacy on a natural basis, but you have to be taught explicitly in order to become literate. So the knowledge about the differences of jargons, of varieties of language, etc., is an excellent prerequisite for learning this difference between orality and literacy. It's also tested to be a very good prerequisite for creativity, for affective and social competencies. And I'm happy to say, and for me this is becoming more and more relevant, it is also a way to postpone dementia, so I can only kind of suggest that we all become multilingual and try to keep, fit over a long period of our lives. We could put this into one single expression. Bilingualism, multilingualism is a very, very good prerequisite for learning. But this is not the way people look at this most of the times. If you look into research, most research is considered to the risk of being bi or multilingual. For example, the risk in performance in these large-scale studies. Speaking a language other than the language of the education system at home is considered to be one of 3 major risk factors for children's development. And indeed, we have a number of information that the risk is there. So this is a German example. The competence to read and write and spell has not been developed upward but downward in the last kind of 20 years. So this is a sad message, and even more sad is that this, after 50 years of migration to Germany, still concerns the children of migrant family most. So the difference between their achievement and the achievement of, I'm an indigenous German, and the autochthonous children is even increasing. So there is something about this aspect of literacy, something the education systems don't fulfill. And that's why we were thinking about a project in my research group in Hamburg. What can we find out about multilingual competencies in this very country, where literacy in multiple languages is not supported. Is there anything like a resource of multiple literacies in the population, in the immigrant populations? And does this influence the way children or youth access language? And what we did, we carried out a research project with the title Multilingual Development Over Time. And in German, it is called the METZ study. So don't bother about these abbreviations. This study tried to follow the research question, can multilingual competencies be an asset for learning, although multilingual competencies are not supported in the way we could expect by the public education system? So what we did, we investigated languages, a number of languages. We investigated German, because this is the language all children learn in Germany, have to. The languages Russian and Turkish, because these were, by the time we started, the two largest languages of immigrant populations in Germany. English, because English is a first foreign language for about all children in Germany in the meantime. And half of the population of German kids learn a second foreign language in secondary education. And the largest is French, and we also wanted to know something about Russian as second foreign language. So what we did, the METZ study, we followed a considerable sample, a substantial sample over time in all these languages. And as far as I know, this study is the first one to do this globally, to follow the development of languages, of this complexity of languages over the period of secondary education, and that's exactly what we did. So we had about 3,100 kids in the sample, in roughly 80 schools in Germany, and we tested children that were considered to be monolingual as well as the bilingual and multilingual kids. So this is just an idea about the sample size. It was a longitudinal study, so we followed the two cohorts, so we cover with our methods the whole period of secondary education in Germany. And this is what we measured. We measured all the languages with a specific method, which I'm not going deeper into here now. And we measured all relevant context factors in order to get fair information. So all social, intellectual, etc., context factors that influence language education, language development. So this is one result, one of our first results. What you see here is one participant of our study, and what you see there is just the symbol German. They can write in German. She could write in German, Russian, English, and French. And German is the best literate language for all our participants. The second best was their heritage language, and then the foreign languages followed. And it is not a surprise that French plays the least role, because this is learned for the shortest period of time when we measure it. Second result, those kids who are good in languages are good in all their languages. So if they are good writers in German, which is in the profile number one, you always see German on top. If they're good writers in German, they would also be good writers in the heritage languages and English. And the information here is, although the heritage languages are not really taught in the public education systems, writing in heritage languages is better than writing in English after they received English for a considerable period of time, most of them from year 1 in the education system onwards. And the third result I would like to show you is that we try to find out if one language is developed good, does this harm the others? Because this is something politicians often think. If we invest in German, in heritage languages, this takes away effort from the others. We found the opposite. What we found is that all languages influence each other, and all influences are positive. So learning German has a positive effect on learning writing, or in this case, in the heritage language, as well as the heritage language writing competence has a positive effect on German. So these are just 3 examples of what we found, and I can put this in a nutshell. Germany is a country with multiple literate competencies. This is a vital resource because these competencies influence each other positively, although this is not supported by the education system. And proof for this is Germany only supports less than 5% of the kids with an immigrant background with offers to teach the heritage languages overall. There are areas where it's better, but overall. So this was an unexpected result. We found this rich resource of potential. So the next step would then be, how can we overcome the traditional way of looking into language education, and this is the way of homogenization or of monolingualization of a school population. This was an adequate way in the foundation phase of the education systems because we needed populations that are able to understand each other. The question is this still the adequate way for the population we have today? And the answer with respect to the results we achieve or the results we have is no, it isn't. So the next step would be then, find ways at first to make the idea that multilingualism is at one normal in a society, at second an asset for education, to make this idea a basis for education and to provide education supporting multilingualism in an appropriate way over time, over the education career. To do this with significant investments over a long period of time, and to try to achieve a change of mindsets in this respect. And I think a good way to achieve this would be to join forces on this. So this is my invitation to you all. Let's join forces, research and practice with a focus on mitigating the challenges posed by diversity, by recognizing and utilizing the potential of diversity for education and social justice. We never give up. That is the message of WERA. And thank you so much that you listened to my ideas, and I hope that we have some time. I don't know, I'm out of time. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. What a message. A promise of the educational system. In some regards, the promise is taken. In other regards, it's not there. It's a broken promise. But there is a mission which is not impossible. And we are all on this not impossible mission. And funders, listen, this needs significant investments. And global educators listening, this needs a change of mindset, and that is our responsibility to do this. It needs a change of mindset in regard of the underlying understanding we have to education. So the way to deal with diversity was now outlined by Ingrid in a very nice and detailed and empirically underlined way. And of course, this is in a broader mindset as well, not only the language, but the way how we understand a world in its diversity and heterogeneity. So joint activities together on working on this, understanding, and I think it was very striking to see what role empirical research plays in changing mindsets and understanding that some mindsets, even if they're repeated 1,000 times by people with power, are not correct, and that this is the power of science to support changing of mindset. Thank you so much. Thank you.